Thank you everyone for joining our session today. We're gonna chat about Indonesia's decarbonization journey, and very lucky to have Pak Rachmat and Pak Cyril, two experts here to give us insights. I think before we start, we'd like to invite Pak Rachmat to give a few presentations about Indonesia decarbonization journey. I think we have about 5-10 minutes presentation to share about Indonesia's landscape.
Okay, thank you, Avina. This is a very challenging task to discuss this because it's a very complex topic. But maybe quickly, let me mention a few things that for Indonesian government, climate change, climate crisis is a very important topic for us. We are a country with 280 million people, 17,500 islands in the equator, in the coastal areas. We will get the brunt of climate change. And of course, if you wanna deal with climate change, you gotta deal with energy transition. So this is mostly my task to do energy transition. Of course, for climate, there is also forest and land use. I'm not an expert. Pak Darsono probably more expert than that. So I'm gonna speak a little bit more about energy transition. But bottom line, when we do energy transition, decarbonization, we need to think about a few things. One, whatever that we do, we have to think about prosperity. Indonesia is a growing country. We have 280 million people that need to be prosperous. So we should not be doing energy transition at the cost of our economic development. And not only, but this I think is aligned. Like everybody now wants lower emission, the supply chain want lower emission. So I think we can make it align. And it so happened that for Indonesia, we do have plenty of potential to grow industry using this micro growth on the green products, if you will. Energy resilience is also a very big topic. And of course, the new government, when I spoke to some of my friends that is in the incoming government, they say, typically the main theme is swasembada pangan, swasembada energy. So self-sufficiency in food and energy. And of course, we do have energy a lot in Indonesia. We export energy, but we export fossil. So we need to think about how can we export green power in the future and reduce our dependency in fuel. So we import, unfortunately, 60% of our oil in Indonesia. And of course, climate change, not only because it's important, but it's also because it's an international commitment. So one thing though, I have to keep highlighting, Indonesia is not the Pareto for climate change. We are half of the global average in the per capita level, compared to US and China, even if we become net zero, if some of these bigger countries, G7 countries and China don't change, we are still get the brunt of the impact. So we have to put that in mind as well. However, we need to set an example. We need to also tell them to change as fast as we do as well. This is the problem that we are facing. This is our energy use profile. Unfortunately, 86% is still fossil, but 3/4 is actually only on three things: coal for electricity, oil for transport, and then coal for industrial use. And each one of them will need to be handled differently. For coal, for electricity, the idea is build as much renewable as possible. For oil, again, electrification or biofuel or hydrogen. Hydrogen is also electrification. And for industry, to be honest, I think this is still challenging. We need to think about it. But bottom line, I think it's a lot about biomass or about green molecules, which also requires green electrons or electricity. So we need to work very hard to handle this. But these are the problems. Good thing, Indonesia have a lot of potential raw materials or resources to go through the green to green products. We have the renewable potential. We have the critical mineral. So we have a fighting chance to lead. And maybe this is the few things that we are working today. One, we are trying to build EV supply chain in Indonesia. Of course, we can do the critical mineral smelting, but without the EV industries, then the downstreaming will stop. So some of my colleagues is doing downstreaming. I said I do the upstreaming. So I produce the market, the retail products. Green power, we do a lot of green power. We need to put it in our RUPTL. Maybe quickly for some of the development finance agencies in Indonesia, hopefully by today, we're gonna issue the the local content requirement adjustment for the electricity sector. So bottom line, if you are funded by DFI's majority, then you can follow your grant or loan agreements. I think this has been a problem before. And again, we are actually dealing with our neighboring countries to export green electrons. We started with Singapore. It's going to be a big deal, tens of billions of dollars. And the requirement for that project is basically the solar panel and the battery should be made in Indonesia. So with that, I think we want to create industries as well as not only creating just raw energy. So quickly, those are my presentation to start the discussion. Thank you, Avina.
Thank you, Pak Rachmat. I think Pak Cyril, going to you, and feel free to play devil's advocate here. I think Rachmat has shared interesting pathways for Indonesia in its decarbonization journey. In your honest view, are we behind here? How are we doing in this net zero transition? What are the challenges? And on the other side, what are the opportunities in the climate transition and this decarbonization effort for Indonesia?
Okay. Thank you, Avina. Thank you for the time and inviting me and this, the summit, East Venture Summits. And first and foremost, I think I have to congratulate East Ventures get the ESG award by Kahati last night. So I think that was great as being investor, impact investor, at least in that area, the ESG area. So congratulations. So it's interesting what Pak Rachmat's presentations. There are a lot of very good and clear aspiration in terms of the Indonesia future in terms of energy conversion. I'm speaking from the investor perspective. INA as the government institution sovereign wealth fund that's been establishing or running in the last 3 years since 2021, and as well as the board from the Kahati Foundation, which is not-profit organizations, of course, from biodiversity perspective. And I look at actually the question is whether the target for Indonesia in terms of energy mix for renewable be achievable or not. I think that's a big challenge. Despite a lot of efforts, even from INA perspective, that has been doing not only technological-based solution, but also natural-based solution, and as well as, waste to energy investment. So those are actually driven by the government. And if you look at, the speech by Ministry of Health this morning, it's been always, promoting the investment and a lot of opportunities. But the question is, how do we actually convert that opportunity into reality? And in the challenge is actually in the details. And as you know, investment is about return. And those converting return and getting a value add is something that's a big challenge. On the energy technology base, of course, the questions on opportunity, yes, there are. Because Pak Rachmat mentioned about the commodity, the nickels, the tin, they are there. And INA has been set up by law and has been investing, let's say in the last 3 years, in several sectors, telco sectors, and of course the renewable sectors, the healthcare sectors, the transportation sectors. And if we're talking about the energy renewable sectors, INA has been investing with Masdar, for example, in geothermal. So that's one of the things, geothermal, Pertamina Geothermal Energy went public and actually early this year, and INA with Masdar jointly invest in geothermal. So that's one of the things that can increase the capacity sourcing from renewable or non-fossil based. So that's on the technology side, as well as actually investing the upstream in the either nickel in the Sulawesi area, and of course in terms of the downstream area for the battery. So we've been doing that on investment. On the nature, actually, we also look at how to reforest the country, especially in Kalimantan area, for example. So we also, INA has been doing that as well. But of course, the ticket size in this case is about over 100 to 100 million US dollar. Different than Kahati that trying to do biodiversity, ESG impact investment. The ticket size is much less than that. Now, waste to energy is a big challenge. On the waste to power, we look at Jakarta every day, 8,000 ton. I think Pak Rachmat knows well this project very well. And of course, waste to power among other elsewhere. And today is in Palembang that INA also participating. That's not too big, 20 megawatts. So that's been also doing. So the challenges are there, but I think the opportunity definitely there to realize the prospects as presented by Pak Rachmat. The one that very interesting, which I think Pak Rachmat is also on his plate, this one is energy transition mechanism. What that means is really to early retire the coal-based power plant as such to reduce the carbon emission. And this is a big challenge because, Pak Rachmat can explain this, because the challenge is not only about financial, but legal implication. So I guess that's the one that to make sure everyone is really happy with this energy transition mechanism. And the Cirebon Power, 660 megawatt. How do we early retire 7 years that actually eventually be, replaced by actually more renewable energy? So I think that's as brief comments because time I think is very limited.
Thank you, Pak Cyril. I think you touched on several interesting opportunities here. We also have our startup founders on the climate sector here. So you touch on waste to energy. I know Ecosystem is working on waste to energy partnership with PLN at the moment. We also have Surya, our portfolio company, who recently closed 55 million US dollars, led by a Swedish and Norwegian fund as well, and also startup in the carbon sector as well. Bang Rachmat, we want to ask about the regulations side. What regulations have been issued and what more can we expect in the future?
Yeah, basically we do have plenty of regulation to support, right? But maybe quickly, if we look at the energy transition, you can look at it from the electricity supply side and also the demand side. For electricity supply, it's all about working with government, PLN and whatnot, right? So it's relatively quite well established. Beyond one of the big things, it's not yet out. Hopefully within this week, next week maybe I'll do a socialization. But the idea for electricity supply is to ensure that we can build as much renewable as possible within reason, within demand, obviously, because you cannot build it and it's not used, right? And one of the biggest, in order for that to happen, one, you need to make sure it's in the RUPTL. So some is already there, but not executed. And the biggest, one of the big blocks is financing and local content. And this also tight, right? For example, our solar panel, local content requirement, this year is 40%, and next year is going to go 60%. And unfortunately, I can tell you, today nobody can make 40% local content solar module. So, and we need to upgrade it or adjust the local content requirement. Also, for example, on the financing side, if it's funded by DFIs, World Bank, ADB, and others, we cannot put local content requirements for that. They have to follow their loan regulation. So we have to adjust that, and hopefully by this month, which is today, it's already done. On the demand side, it's quite harder. It's much more complex, and therefore some of this incentive regulation need to happen, because you just for electricity you just need to deal with PLN. You just need PLN and the IPPs. We are talking about, I don't know, a room full of people. But if you talk about transportation, you deal with 150 million vehicles. That is 150 million people. So then we have to give incentive. We have to introduce the product incentive. And I don't know whether you get to visit Gias last week. I just got a report. Today, there are 23 types of cars that is already have 40% local content or already deemed local by the government. Versus maybe two years ago. And basically we create incentive to attract investment. We give them 2 years waiver of import duty and luxury tax, but they have to produce 1-to-1 ratio by 2027. They have to put bank guarantee to make sure that they commit to their promise. And so far, a few of these companies come and they start doing well. Yeah.
I think related to the electric mobility as well, we do have an investment in Maka Motors as well. So downstairs in the ground floor, there is a booth showcasing the show as well. Pak Rahmat, I want to shift to the IPO market. You led one of the biggest IPO in Indonesia before. Exit market has always been in the investor's mind, investors' question as well. Can you share a bit about that? And I think from Pak Cyril as well, as a board of Kahati, Kahati has a Sri Kahati Index, which leads the ESG tracking index on the Indonesia Stock Exchange. Why is ESG important, and do you see tangible values of implementing ESG?
Well, Bukalapak IPO is a lifetime ago for me, so I need to think about the memory. But what I can say is maybe one thing, the money is there, right? That is very, very surprising for us. Initially, at the time, we didn't expect that to be that successful initially. And then once we do roadshow, then we see the demand. Was like, wow, this is very, very good. So as long as you have a good story, you have a good, you follow the process, and then you can do it. That is the reason why we become the first unicorn to do IPO, because we follow the existing regulation, for example. So maybe that.
Okay, on the Kahati, the Sri Kahati Index, the background is very simple. Well, first and foremost, of course, Kahati was founded by prominent economist, Professor Emi Salim. And of course, there are other experts in the environmentalists also joining and creating this Kahati. But then realized that, hey, the global warming crisis climate actually driven by industry, driven by actual electricity, driven by transportation, and definitely, of course, need to be seen from investor perspective, not individual, but institutional investors. So institutional investor, meaning fund managers, pension funds, sovereign wealth fund, whoever they are actually making the investment, have to be mindful about the implications of making the investment. Now, United Nations Principal Responsible for Investment in 2007 actually started the encouragement to, hey, investors, please do mind on global warming impact long term. So Kahati starts saying that, okay, let's start with creating index that leads to ESG impact, what is actually off. Then maybe about 400 listed company in early 2000. So Kahati 2009 launched Sri Kahati Index, selecting 25 index. So that's a starting point. But the last 2-3 years, creating another 2 index, 45 listed companies, and more advanced in terms of how actually the criteria for those listed company under that index. So simple for investors. Then if they would like to see company that to some degree comply both elements, economic performance as well as the ESG elements, that would be the index. And that is the reason to do it. And so, so far, at least been consistent in terms of doing the vision mission on the biodiversity for Kati.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Cyril and Pak Rahmat. Final question to conclude this session. What are the roles that us here, investors, founders, partners, here can play in Indonesia decarbonization journey? Maybe we keep it short and memorable.
I think from the investor perspective, again, opportunity is there, but again, mindful that everything has risk and know your risk appetite, and just the risk relates to knowledge. I think that's all. Thank you.
Well, as a capital allocator, I think the responsibility for investors is to put capital where the industries don't use fossil too much anymore. So I think that's what you can do to support the energy transition.
All right, thank you so much, Pak Rahmat and Pak Cyril. With that, I will leave it back to the MC.
Thank you.